It's the Eiffel Tower. This is the, classic establishing shot to prove that we're in Paris. Built for the 1889 exposition. Once every 7 years, they have to paint it. It's like tons of paint. It's ridiculous. So that's what that scaffolding at the bottom is, because this is the 20th campaign. In fact, you go up to the bottom of it, and there's whole signage with that. Hi. We've traveled twice during the pandemic, international travel twice during the pandemic, because we're ridiculously stupid people and we love this city too much. But I want to talk about what the difference between the two times is, because in August of 2020 was the first time we traveled. That was before the vaccines were around, and now here it's December 2021, the vaccines are available. The difference between the two, at the time, Canada had extremely low case count. I think Ontario only had 700 active cases in the whole province in August. And again, pre-vaccine. So for some weird reason, we weren't required to get a test before we got on the plane. We were able to just fly over. We had to wear masks the entire time we were on the plane. They gave us pre-packaged cold food, even though we were in the business class. And we had the business class almost entirely to ourselves. It was a 40-seat section of the plane. Hardly anybody was traveling. But it was between waves, and it was summertime. And one of the reasons why it was great to come here then, what we call a unique moment, is because America wasn't allowed to come here. So the only Americans that were here were the ones that were here for, trade, government, vital supplies, and who lived here. So there weren't any Americans. There weren't any people visiting from Asia. And that's usually the reason why you don't want to come here during August, is because it's horribly expensive and it's filled with tourists. Well, there were hardly any of that. And then we added to that the fact that August is when most of the Parisians actually go on vacation. So there's only a third of the Parisians in the country. It was an extremely empty city. It wasn't expensive. It was brilliant. It was wonderful. We came here, we got a fantastic room at a fantastic price with a fantastic view. We had a great time. Hardly anybody around. Basically, when we started, you had to wear a mask if you were in the tourist sections, and then it got to the point where you had to wear a mask whenever you were outside. And then when we went back, we had a 2-week quarantine. And that was travel during COVID, previous to there being a vaccine. Fast forward a year and a half later, vaccines in place, double vaxxed for both of us, vaccine certificates. And when we were coming here, when we originally booked, all we were going to need were our passports to travel like you would normally, and our vaccine status. Having the full 2 doses from a green country that Canada is meant that we weren't going to have to quarantine, we weren't going to have to isolate, we weren't even looking at getting tests when we came over. We were just free and clear. The wonderful thing is, you go into almost any pharmacy here, you pay €40, you show them your vaccine passport from Canada, they're able to enter it into the system and give you a French vaccine passport. And now we're able to go into museums and restaurants, and even an app for it, and it's brilliant. And that's what we were looking at. And then the Omicron showed up. And the moment the Omicron showed up, we needed a negative test just to fly out of Canada. They weren't even going to let us on the plane unless we had a negative test. There was a possibility of a random test on arrival in Paris with the possibility of being quarantined. And there was an attestation form, a form that Air France just stressed over and over again we were going to have to print out, we were going to have to sign, we were going to have prepared when we went through passport control, confirming that we were clear. And it's the same stuff we've been answering at almost every building you go to. Do you have a fever? Do you have a cough? Do you have any reason why you shouldn't be in here? Blah, blah, blah. You sign your name, you're done. What they didn't mention, and I'm going to have to check all the emails because I did go through everything rather firmly. I had co-workers who were from Europe who checked stuff on the French side as to what was required. At no point did anybody come across anything mentioning this. We get to the airport and we had to sit there on our phones at the gate and complete a whole other form on a website to get a QR code nobody has asked to see, right? Nobody asked to see, when we were going through passport control, they wanted to see our passports. That was it. They didn't want to see our vaccine status. They didn't want the adaptation that they stressed that we have. Nobody has asked to see this thing called the EU PLF, or the QR code for it. And I'm just telling you right now, if you're thinking about international travel, check into that, because that held us up at the airport at the gate, where you don't want to be held up while people are getting on the plane. You don't want to be that. But yeah, that was the thing that we had to do in order to get on the plane. Whatever for, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I'm gonna have to check that out. But again, that was a last minute hurdle. It was like we were on the Amazing Race, and there's the finish line, and all of a sudden we got hit with a detour challenge. That was not pleasant, particularly since neither one of us use these that much. I'm a keyboard person, and Trudy just got her phone like a year ago. To come back, we're gonna need a negative test before, which we can get at almost any pharmacy for like €40. That's no big deal. Those are relatively convenient to arrange. You pre-book them, the whole business. And that was the case before Omicron. We were going to need that anyway. But now we're going to be tested on arrival, and we're going to have to self-isolate or quarantine until that test is confirmed. And that's only because we're fully vaccinated. So that's what we're looking at now. That's what traveling during this half of COVID is like, during the Omicron, December of 2021. Far more complicated than it was in August. I'm not even going to get into the ridiculousness of the screw up that happened on the Canadian side before we left with our tests that held us up at the airport, forced us to go over and get another rapid test done. That was a whole other thing. Hopefully, if you're traveling, you will not have to face that hurdle, but we did, and yeah, that was the pre-detour detour. I don't know, I don't watch The Amazing Race anymore. Do they do a double whammy challenge? I don't know. But anyway, so lot to go through for that, but we did it. One more thing, because it's not just that we did it for. The baguettes are wonderful. The omelets are fantastic. The food is amazing. The museums are incredible. We've been coming here once a year, even during the pandemic. And yeah, there's no place on the planet I'd rather be, even though right now it's a bit gray and chilly. It's still beautiful, man. It's still Paris. Let's see if I can get over and you can just... This is the park by the Champ de Mars. I don't know what your life is like. Mine isn't like this normally. I have to come here for that. Anyway, that's it. Travel during COVID.